So we're on page 64 of Sri Sharda Devi and her divine play, and they were sitting down, Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother, and he had gotten her to sit on the platform and was worshiping her as the Divine Mother, and he was doing the worship, and immediately says that Sharada lost outer consciousness and went into samadhi. And while uttering mantras in a semi-conscious state, the master also went into a deep samadhi. Thus, the worshiper and the worshipped became fully united and unified in the Atman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. This is an extremely important point because this is the state of realization. When the subject, the object, and the relationship collapse into that singularity, that is samadhi, when there's no more separateness. And so here you have the worshiper, you have that which is worshipped, and the act of worship, all three of them collapsing into a unity in the form of Holy Mother being deep in samadhi and Thakur being deep in samadhi, which means Thakur and Ma were no longer Thakur and Ma. There was a single samadhi happening of a single deity who normally was manifesting through Mother and through Thakur, but now both of the manifestations had been drawn into that singularity. And so here we have that collapse. And this is why God is the one thing that the tongue cannot pollute, because this singularity happens, the triad collapses, subject-object relationship always collapses into a one without a second. And so that's what we're actually watching from a perspective of ignorance. And so now we have Holy Mother sitting on the altar in deep samadhi, and Thakur in front of her, having done the act of worship, now himself also in an unmovable deep samadhi. And you can only imagine the stillness of that room must have just been overwhelming, to sit in the presence of really what is a pure manifestation of a unity that happens in the presence of pure love, that happens in the presence of an unconditioned love. And so we're actually seeing the unity of the three separate selves, God, Mother, and Thakur. We're seeing that unity happen before our eyes right here. And, quite amazing. It says that some time passed in this way. It was long after midnight when the master gradually regained partial consciousness of the world. In that semi-conscious state, he offered himself to the Devi manifest in the person of Sharda, and then forever surrendered at her feet himself, the results of his sadhanas, his rosary, and everything else. He then bowed down to her with this prayer. This is quite beautiful here. O consort of Shiva, the most auspicious of all auspicious beings, O doer of all actions, O refuge of all, O three-eyed goddess of golden complexion, O power of Narayana, I salute you again and again. So here you see the qualities of the Divine Mother as the Divine Mother of the universe, no longer just as the manifestation of Sharada, of Sri Sharada, but now we see Thakur surrendering everything to the Divine Mother. And it's from this point, actually, that the Holy Mother became called the Holy Mother, that she was called the Divine Mother by the other disciples. So consort of Shiva, the consort of the utmost renunciation, the consort of the utmost purity. And so we saw that manifest in their relationship, that Shiva is normally the ideal of monastics because of his intense renunciation, living in the burning ghats for the dead bodies, and just absolute power of renunciation and that purity. And so here we see, again, that in this relationship, Thakur is Shiva, that burning renunciation, and the Divine Mother, the consort of the universe, is is the support of that, is the strength behind that, is the doership, the manifester of all that, right? Without the Divine Mother, there is no manifestation. God cannot show himself without the Divine Mother, without that power of manifestation, the power of existence, and that's done through the divine. So, O consort of Shiva, the most auspicious of all auspicious beings. So, Holy Mother, here seen by Thakur himself as the most auspicious of all auspicious beings. So, where has he placed Mother? At the very top of the heap, with even himself bowing and surrendering to that. O doer of all actions, it is the Divine Mother who is the movement, who is the manifestation. She is the power of the divine. And of course, they can't really be separated except as a viewer. We can see the power, we can see feel the heat of the fire and see the light of the fire, but you can't have one without the other. So this speaks to the unity that they experience in samadhi. But in the manifestation, which is under the power of the Divine Mother, we see Thakur and Ma. We don't see the one without a second. We see this power. O refuge of all. And of course, everybody who talks about the Divine Mother talks about refuge, because just of that, she is the very symbol of that. And Thakur says that no one has their realization without the permission of the Divine Mother. You have to go to the Divine Mother to be released from this world. O refuge of all, O three-eyed goddess. Three-eyed means the eye of wisdom there, the middle eye. I think mine's missing, but that eye of wisdom, that's there in the middle. O goddess of golden complexion, O power of Narayana, I salute you again and again. And so you see here Thakur, literally by giving over his rosary, giving over all of the benefits of his practice, completely bowing down in utter surrender to the power of the divine. He knew that the Divine Mother ran his play, that all of his play, his manifestation as Avatar himself, was under her power and with her permission and with her strength. And so here, in a very real way, he's acknowledging that. And the reason we're reading it is for us to understand this, The worship was completed. The master's sadhana culminated in this worship of the Divine Mother in the body of a woman who was an embodiment of spiritual wisdom. Both his divine and human aspects had achieved ultimate perfection. So this is quite a statement. The master's sadhana, all of his spiritual practice culminated in this worship of the Divine Mother. That this was the fulfillment of all of his spiritual practice, was this absolute surrender of even himself as manifest, even himself as doer, even himself as anything. After this worship, there was nothing. There was nothing outside of the Mother for him. Of course, we see that we see how that could be the culmination of his practice, because you see in his practices that kind of surrender and that kind of constantly going to the Divine Mother for permission, for instructions, for clarity, for answers to his questions, which is another very beautiful pointer for us. That when we do have things going on in life, if you do have the habit of going and asking the divine and then sitting quietly for an answer, just sitting quietly, the answer may not come today. If it doesn't come today, you sit again tomorrow quietly. You don't even have to ask the question again tomorrow. You just go and sit quietly waiting for an answer. And that's how we learn to hear the divine voice within. It's in that practice of sitting silently that we learn to turn down the volume of our doership the volume of our egoism. And when we get that volume down low enough, then we suddenly realize that we have a sense in there that is tuned to the voice of God, that is tuned to the divine will, as it were. I can never say divine will with a straight face, because it seems like such a funny concept to me, that the divine would have a will. How can you be all powerful, everywhere present, always perfect, and have something called a will? It seems like if there's any kind of projection of ignorance on God, it's giving God a will. I think that is the largest projection of ignorance we could do. Sharada later recalled the events of that night. The master performed the Shodashi Puja a month and a half after my arrival in Dakshineswar. It was the night of the Palaharini Kali Puja. People were excited by the festive singing and the music in the temple. At about 9 at night, he sent for me to come to his room. Hriday had made all the necessary arrangements for the worship. Dinu, one of the master's distant nephews, picked the flowers and the bell leaves for the worship. The master was alone in the room. He asked me to sit on a low wooden seat. I sat facing the jar of Ganges water, which was in the northwestern corner of the room. The master sat near the western door facing eastward. All the doors were closed. The articles for worship were to my right. First, he painted my feet with alta, a red dye, put vermilion on my forehead, and clad me in a new cloth. He then fed me with sweets and a betel roll. I saw him doing all this, but had no desire to utter a word. I was in an ecstatic state and completely oblivious to the external world. Hence, I did not know exactly how the worship proceeded. Finally, I bowed down to him mentally and returned to the Nahabat. So, beautiful. To be so resolved, so resigned, so surrendered, that the awareness or the thoughts of what was going on, in truth, had nothing to do with you as a body-mind, but had everything to do with the divine, with that divine stillness, that divine oneness. And her talking about an experience of that is amazing. What an amazing insight we can get from this. That, there was no awareness on her part of what was happening or what was going on. That is samadhi, because she, even in that self, it doesn't make any sense, because she, even who is just being praised as the doer of all doings, is also, as a particular, unaware of all those doings, that those doings come from a source even deeper within and prior to the manifested self, the manifested particular. So here you have just this very magical, very mystical dance. Two possibilities, two impossibilities, manifesting a third impossibility. Amazing. What's really amazing is you can add this little wooden platform that she sat on. You can see at Bellarmont, and it's still there where she sat to be worshipped.
Raj?
Yes.
Can I ask you for a big favor? Can you please read the chanting that Thakur did during the worship? I don't have the book with me, that is why. Just one more time, if you can.
Read you mean the prayer that he gave?
Yeah.
At the end? Because I don't have the chants here. Oh. It says that he uttered the mantras and invoked the deity with the following prayer. O Divine Mother Tripura Sundari, O Eternal Virgin, possessor of all power, please open the gate of perfection. Purify her body and mind and manifest yourself through her for the welfare of all. Then it says he performed it and he went into a deep samadhi, and some time passed, and then he bows down with this prayer. O consort of Shiva, the most auspicious of all auspicious beings, O doer of all actions, O refuge of all, O three-eyed goddess of golden complexion, O power of Narayana, I salute you again and again. The master's sadhana culminated in this worship of the Divine Mother in the body of a woman who was the embodiment of spiritual wisdom. Both his divine and human aspects had achieved ultimate perfection through the Divine Mother. Yeah.
Hey, Swami, that's the Sarvamangala.
Mangalya Sarvata Satike. That is what is always sung in the Arati, because Thakur worshipped her with that.
If Greg wants to sing that for us, he can at any time.
Huh?
I said if Greg would like to sing that for us, he can sing it at the end, maybe.
Oh, okay. That will be wonderful.
Oh, did you hear that, Greg? Kamala would like to hear that at the end. This ceremony was significant for both Ramakrishna and Sharada for 4 reasons. First, although both were divine, when they incarnated as human beings, their minds were covered with a thin veil of Maya. Yes, for any manifestation, there has to be a touch of ignorance. Otherwise, there's no manifestation. Or there's no particular. Some little piece has to be in there. There has to be that one piece of sand in the oyster in order to create the pearl. If they were always aware of their true nature, they would not have functioned in the world. It wouldn't have made any sense. There'd be no time for them. There would be no past, no future, no memory. There would be no egoism, no sense of separateness from the whole. So they literally would just sit there in samadhi, which would be a lovely thing. But they would just eternally sit there in samadhi. They would never. And this is what goes on in those higher realms. You know, when Thakur talks about that vision when he chose to come down to the world, and one of my favorite sentences in the whole of what I've read in Vedanta is Thakur saying that he jumped over the wall in the indivisible. It's like, okay, well, how do you put a wall in the indivisible? How is it indivisible if it's got a wall through it? But anyway, Thakur jumps over that, and then he passes the 7 rishis, the great rishis, the writers, how do you say that? The writers, I guess, the writers of the Vedas. He passes them, and one of them he goes over and whispers in his ear, "I'm going down," and that's Vivekananda, was one of those 7 stars of the rishis in the land of the indivisible, in deep samadhi, deep meditation. And so Thakur's star goes down to the earth, and then Vivekananda's star comes down behind him, and they don't meet again until they actually meet on the planet. And Ramakrishna is always looking for his disciples who came there. He's always waiting to meet them. That's what he's going up on the rooftop and calling out from the top of the temple, you know, "My disciples, where are you? My heart is burning to see you," you know. And so they would come. So if they were always aware of their true nature, they could not have functioned in the world. When they were young, they were not fully aware of their divinity. Because Ramakrishna had attained illumination by performing sadhana, he decided to awaken his young wife's divinity. Okay, so this is where they both fully experienced and became fully aware of their light, of their divinity, in this culminating samadhi that they experienced together. Actually, that's one of those things you can't say that. They did not experience samadhi together, because neither of them were there at the point of samadhi. There was no Sharada, there was no Ramakrishna at that moment. There was God. And the 2 manifestations had frozen, were a glove with the hand withdrawn at that point. But we would see a shared samadhi, but samadhi can't be shared, because samadhi is the one. You know, to have samadhi, you leave the particular, you leave the sense of separateness, And so it's always the same one who has samadhi. Because that's what samadhi is you lay down all of your separateness and become the one without a second. You give yourself over to that. So it is only God who experiences samadhi. That's experience. All right, so the second reason it was very important, their souls became one with pure consciousness and transcended the idea of sex, which originates from body consciousness. Just as Ramakrishna saw the Divine Mother in Sharada, she also saw the Master as the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. Sharada later said to one of her disciples, "Know that the Master and I are identical." All right, there you have it. And can't get more clear, more black and white than that. Know that the Master and I are identical. That is, of course, what she would know after this samadhi experience. Because like we said, two people do not enter into samadhi. There is only samadhi. Ramakrishna said of her, "She is my Shakti, my power. She is my power. Without her, there's no power. Nothing can happen without the Divine Mother." The scriptures say, Shakti Shaktiman Abheda. Shakti and the possessor of Shakti are inseparable. Right? So that to me has been a beautiful help to practice. Because there's sometimes when you want to look into a man's face and lay out your problems, and there's sometimes when you want to look into a beautiful divine woman's face and share your troubles and your struggles. And it is two very different experiences. And there's times when you want to go to Vivekananda and lay out your troubles if you're bold and daring. And so in this marvelous manifestation in 3, we get such a privilege, I think, such a privilege that God in 3 full manifestations, and in a sense, for God to fully manifest, he has manifested all of us. All of us are incarnations in that sense, that it takes all the manifestation of everything to be God, to be complete. That if it wasn't the whole working together. But here we have the 3 most powerful manifestations, the purest manifestations of God coming simultaneously. And even though now there's 3, it's still not the whole story. Even the 3 of them, as much as they capture of the divine, as much beauty and strength and power and wisdom and wonder that they embody in their lives, it still is not a complete picture of God. That God would have billions of Thakurs and Jesuses and Ramas manifesting simultaneously. And even still, there would be gaps in what could be known and what could be seen of the divine. Third, in this ceremony, the Master gave Sharada a taste of divine love. By worshipping Sharada as the goddess Shodashi, Ramakrishna paid the highest respect to all womankind. He then empowered Sharada to teach the motherhood of God after his passing, thus demonstrating that women are not inferior to men. They are to be world teachers. Fourth, Ramakrishna offered to Sharada the results of his many years of sadhana. By doing so, he empowered her to conduct his ministry without her having to practice those sadhanas herself, and he made her the full partner in his spiritual glory. She attained the exalted position of a spiritual teacher without needing to endure the usual austerities practiced by the saints. The spiritual disciplines that she did perform were not for her own illumination, but for the benefit of her disciples. So we get a couple of things there in black and white. If anybody was doubting that women are not inferior to men, now you've got an official teaching on it, that if you think that way or act that way, you are in the wrong. And we see that the culmination of all the master's work gave him this recognition and understanding, as he completely submitted and completely bowed to the power of Shakti, to Shakti. Later, a woman devotee asked Holy Mother, "Well, Mother, how did you feel when the master worshipped you as Shodashi?" She answered with a bashful smile, "What can I say? I couldn't understand the mystery. I was not myself then," which is a wonderful way, an amazingly humble way of saying, I wasn't there. You know, there was no particular there at that time. I was not myself then. Perhaps the Divine Mother, Bhavatarini, possessed me, so I was not aware of what was going on. I saw that the master dressed me, applied red paint to my feet, worshipped me, bowed down to me, but nothing made any impression on my mind. I sat still, and the master finally made a full prostration, touching my feet. Afterward, when I regained my normal consciousness, I mentally bowed down to him again and again and begged for forgiveness. Saying this, she closed her eyes and remained quiet. So this forgiveness, the explanation in the footnote is that because the master bowed down to her, according to the custom in India, a wife bows down to her husband, but not a husband to his wife. And so if you're going to ask me to say something edgy about this, I'm going to say that hereby master is teaching husbands to bow down to their wife in the same way that the wife bows down to the husband. That's the true teaching. Not that nobody should bow, but that everybody should bow. And a beautiful marriage, and what a beautiful marriage it would be if both the husband and the wife were not just rotely bowing to each other, but actually had surrendered to the well-being of the other. What a perfect marriage that would be. That is divine marriage. And I think we see this in Thakur and Ma, that neither act out of their own interest. They both had fully surrendered to the other. And in that surrender, this other, of course, is the divine. But you know, this is the marvelous mystery of God, is that there is no particular. There's not a head of state that gets all of the bows. God is always bowing in a circle, so that there is no one person, no one thing being surrendered to, but everybody is constantly in the state of surrender to the whole, to the one without a second. And that one without a second is not a particular, because there's no exclusion. There's nothing outside of that one. But I love this last reaction. After saying this, she closes her eyes and remains quiet. You know, 'cause can you imagine the feelings that must have arisen at just even the memory of this powerful, probably one of the most powerful spiritual events in the world happening? And you know, us, you know, I think of myself, which but I could think of nothing like this. But the little tiny trinkets that I can think of also make me want to be quiet, also make me want to just sit in that beautiful space of honor, of giving out of self, you know, in the face of true love. And so what an amazing thing for Mother, how deeply she must have felt that as she recounted this, and then just sat there silently, just holding this immense treasure.
Maharaj, I think it was also, you know, when she says the mind was not there, I think there was a line before. Yeah. And it's only when the mind returns that all those feelings or those come. Till the mind was not there, there's nothing there except stillness from both sides.
That's exactly that stillness. Yeah, the purest form of Satchitananda.
So she says, when the mind returned, then I felt the, the whatever other feelings that came or the emotions that came during that.
Yes, absolutely. So the mind, so they both had experienced that absolute stillness of mind, absolute absence of mind. I mean, still mind in Brahman. So mind is still, there's no more mind as we talk about it, would not be there. But yeah, absolutely. So she comes back from that, but she would come back from that in the same way that we wake up from a sleep. Whereas means if we had a good night's rest, all that residue of a good night's rest comes to you when you wake up, you're ready to go. Can you imagine what the residue of this experience was? That deep sense of bliss, that deep, deep sense of peace. Oof, 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 oof. After the Shodashi Puja, Holy Mother continued her daily routine of cooking, cleaning, and serving her husband and mother-in-law. She slept in the master's room for another 6 months. She later vividly described those nights to her disciples. It is impossible to describe his spiritual moods in those days. In his God-intoxicated state, he would sometimes say words incomprehensible to me, sometimes laugh, sometimes weep, and sometimes remain motionless in samadhi like a corpse. The whole night would pass that way. My body trembled with fear as I eagerly awaited the break of day. At that time, I knew almost nothing about samadhi. One night, his mind did not come down to the ordinary plane of consciousness for a long time. I was frightened, and I sent for Hriday. He came and repeated the Lord's name for a while into the master's ear. Only then did the master regain his normal mood. After that day, the master taught me various mantras and also told me how to use them for different kinds of samadhi. Thus, I gradually got rid of my fear and also succeeded in bringing his mind down from samadhi. But as I did not know when he would go into samadhi, I kept awake all night. Coming to realize my plight, he asked me to sleep in the Nahabat. Right. So when he came to realize that he was keeping her awake all night long every night, she was so nervous about not getting him out of samadhi, then he sends her away, to where she can get some peace, so that she can sleep a good night. So I won't make fun of that. I was going to say, so ladies, you have the permission to send your husband away for the night so that you can get some peace.
To the Nahabat outhouse.
To the Nahabat, yes. It really is a very small little room. It really is humbling to think of her carrying on there like that. That's just, yeah. Anyway. There are 2 Nahabats in the temple garden of Dakshineswar, one in the south and the other in the north. Holy Mother lived with her mother-in-law in the northern Nahabat, Chandramani staying upstairs and Holy Mother downstairs. Her tiny octagonal room was 7 feet 9 inches long and 7 feet 9 inches wide. Its ceiling was 9 feet 3 in height. Its door was 2 feet 2 inches wide and 4 foot 2 high, too low for Holy Mother, who was approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall. Holy Mother recalled, the door to the Nahabat was so low that at first I would always bump my head against the upper frame. One day I got a cut on my forehead. Then I became accustomed to it. My head bent of itself as soon as I approached the door. Many aristocratic women from Calcutta frequently came there. They would stand at the door, peep inside, and remark, what a tiny room for our good child. She is in exile, as it were, like Sita. In our minds, we can see Holy Mother busy with her housework and forgetting herself in her service to her husband and mother-in-law. Her head bumps against the doorframe and tears trickle from her eyes. Covering her wound with her veil and ignoring the pain, she serves her husband and mother-in-law. Chandramani was so infirm that she could hardly move, and she depended on her daughter-in-law for everything. If anyone cautioned Holy Mother not to hurry, she would reply, "My respected mother-in-law is now old. She needs me. So when she calls, I must rush to her." So we can see, yes, we can see that these were difficult circumstances, and we can see that there is a way to improve it. But what we can really see is the attitude of the Divine Mother, where God for her was everywhere present and always perfect. Her contentedness, Thakur's contentedness, anybody on the spiritual path, our contentedness does not come from conditions. Our fullness in life does not come from conditions. We're not trying to create an outside world that's happy for us. We're trying to find the bliss which is permanent within us. We're trying to find the presence which is permanently established within us, which fills us, contents us, brings us to our inner joy, to our inner contentment. That, if Thakur had gone and tried to change the outside world, what lesson would we have gotten? That contentedness comes from the outside world. That inner peace comes from a condition of being, a certain set of environmental constructs. That's not what he's teaching, and that's not where he put his energy. He wanted us to find the place where we can be content and at peace and full, regardless of the condition of the environment that we're in, regardless of the people, regardless of the injustices, regardless of the social structures. This is a truth that will work for you in a concentration camp, at a birthday party, in your car, at your job, in a good marriage, in a bad marriage. You can find a place within that is a refuge and will give you strength and will feed you and will bring you forward in a beautiful way, regardless of what you're having to endure in an external circumstance as a body and mind. So hold on to that teaching. It's a great teaching. It's a great teaching that will teach us to be free from mind, to be willing to be able to bow down to this world, just the power of the Mother, accept what it brings, and make gold out of it. That's our job. Every moment, take what is given and create gold. That's how we live as children of the divine. All right, let me